One of the scariest things isn't what you see, but what you can't explain when it happens right in front of you. Welcome to the channel. In today's video, I'll be telling you 4 true horror stories, eerie, haunting, and unforgettable experiences that happened to people while they were in the dark, in places that seemed completely safe, or in the most ordinary of moments. You might find yourself turning on the lights after hearing what comes next, because some of these stories made people too terrified to ever sleep in their own homes again. Story 1. Melody in the dark. I've explored a lot of deserted places at night, but that night at O.P. Schnabel Park, something felt different. Something that didn't belong to this world. I was 18, living in San Antonio, Texas. It was the spring of 2020. COVID-19 had shut down schools and everything around us was steeped in silence. But my group of friends and I spent many nights exploring abandoned places, a kind of urban exploration I'd been passionate about since I was a kid. I wasn't someone who scared easily. I'd come face to face with homeless people, dealt with creepy strangers, and even had a gun pointed at my head once. But none of that compared to what I experienced in a park that seemed harmless. That night, I invited Clarissa, a girl I had just started dating, to O.P. Schnabel Park at 3 a.m. During the day, the place is peaceful and beautiful, but at night, it turns into a cold, eerie landscape where the moon is blocked by thick trees and police patrol the area to keep people out. We walked along the main path for about 15 minutes. Everything was eerily quiet. I decided to lead her onto a narrow trail through the woods, one that would loop back to where I had parked, so we wouldn't have to retrace our steps. Only 2 minutes after turning onto the trail, we heard a flute. A soft flute melody drifted through the pitch-black silence. The tune was hauntingly smooth, almost too perfect. Clarissa stopped gripping my hand tightly. She began to tremble. When she started whispering prayers, asking God to forgive her sins, that's when I knew this wasn't a prank. The sound seemed to be getting closer, but we couldn't tell where it was coming from. In woods like these, everything echoes in a way that makes it feel like something is breathing right down your neck. I whispered, "Run. Now." And we took off into the darkness. Suddenly, a loud crash echoed ahead of us like something big barreled across the trail just in front of us. No shape, no time to react. Just the sound of branches snapping and a strange gust of wind that brushed across my face. We turned and sprinted back the way we came. And then, the flute played again. This time it was louder, closer, and faster, as if the person playing it was chasing us. The melody had the rhythm of a festive tune, but it was twisted offbeat and icy cold, like something calling from another world. We didn't stop. I grabbed Clarissa's hand and pulled her through the darkness back to the main road. It took us about 7 or 8 minutes to reach the parking lot. I had never run that fast in my life. As we neared my truck, I paused, gasping for air. No one around. No lights. Not a soul in sight. But as I opened the truck door and looked back toward the trees, I saw a figure wearing a hood standing silently behind a tree facing us. No visible face, no movement, just standing there. And then it vanished as the headlights swept over it. I never found out who played that flute or what rushed across the path in front of us in the dark. But the part that chills me to this day, Clarissa, one of the most rational people I know, still insists that the sound wasn't a flute at all. She swears it was someone calling her name hidden inside the melody. Story 2. The Graveyard Shift Ghost. There are some nights in the hospital when you feel like you're the only one still alive. Or maybe you're not the only one. I was a 20-year-old pharmacy technician working the night shift at a hospital in northwest Alabama. From 6 p.m. to 4 a.m., I wandered through cold hallways delivering medications to operating rooms and inpatient floors. The night shift brings quiet, but it also makes you hear more than you'd like to. One Wednesday night, after nearly 38 hours without sleep, I started feeling lightheaded. I tried to stay awake with Red Bull music and keeping busy, but when you're that exhausted, something or someone seems to start watching you from the darkest corners of the hospital. At 2 a.m., I headed up to the 5th floor to drop off some meds. Units 51 and 52 were still lit, a few nurses and patients around. But 54-55 completely dark, under renovation, empty and freezing cold. I stepped into the hallway. My footsteps echoed on the floor. Everything was still. And then from room 5512, I heard a metallic clatter. I moved closer. There was an old man lying on the bed, convulsing violently, blood pouring from his eyes, nose, and mouth. A chilling gargle filled the room, along with the chaotic beep-beep of the heart monitor. I stumbled back in horror, heart frozen. But just 3 seconds later, when I looked again, the room was empty. The bed was neatly made. The monitor was off. Not a single trace of anyone ever being there. I gasped. Tried to convince myself I was hallucinating from lack of sleep. But when I got back to the elevator to head downstairs, an older man in a security uniform stepped in lightly, tapped my shoulder, and smiled. It was the same old man from the bed. I stood frozen. The elevator doors closed. I watched the numbers rise back to the 5th floor. And then, a few minutes later, the same elevator opened again. No one inside. At dawn, while I waited for my wife to pick me up, I glanced up at the 5th floor windows from the ground level. And right then, he was standing there, staring straight down at me, not blinking, not moving. I got in the car without saying a word. And to this day, I still don't know if it was the hallucination of a sleep-deprived mind, or something else that lingers in the hospital halls each night. Story 3. Knocking in the dark. Not every knock on the door comes from someone you know, especially when you've never heard that voice before. I lived with my boyfriend in a cute little house on a quiet street, the kind of place where you can hear the leaves fall and barely a car passes by each night. Our house was at the bend of the neighborhood, a little secluded thanks to a curve in the road. But I never minded that, until that one fateful weekend. My boyfriend had gone to Las Vegas for a bachelor party with his friends. I stayed home alone from Thursday to Monday. To keep from feeling lonely, I invited a few girlfriends over for wine and horror movies. Laughter filled the living room, until the doorbell rang around midnight. We all fell silent. I slowly walked to the front door. There was a small glass pane near the top. Under the dim porch light, I saw no one, but someone had definitely rung the bell. With 4 cars parked in the driveway, they must have known people were home. We figured it was just a prank, someone ringing and running off. But that night, after my friends had left and I had fallen asleep, the bell rang again, this time twice in a row. I woke up. It was just past 1 a.m. Then, a knock on the window, and a man's voice whispered, "Is anyone home?" "I need help." I froze. Thankfully, the curtains were drawn. He couldn't see me. But then the knocking grew louder and he said, "I know. You're in there." I called the police, trembling in the dark. 10 minutes later, there was a loud knock on the door and another voice called out, "Police." I peeked through the glass. It was 2 real officers. But when I opened the door, one tall man pushed inside without waiting for an invitation. His demeanor was cold, dismissive. As I tried to explain, he said, "If you can't describe what the guy looked like, you're wasting our time." They did a half-hearted sweep of the house, found nothing, and left, leaving me more shaken than before. The next night, I came home late from a Halloween party. As soon as I walked in, I felt a chill. One of the windows was wide open. Then I saw the basement door was also open. I stepped toward it. Click, 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 came from down below. I moved closer to the staircase, and then that voice echoed again from the shadows. Finally, you're home. I bolted out the front door, ran to the neighbor's house, and called the cops again. Same 2 officers showed up. Their tone was a bit softer this time. They searched the place more thoroughly, still found nothing. But I knew someone had been in that basement. I packed a bag and stayed at my sister's place until my boyfriend got back. Story 4. The Man in the 5th Floor Window. There are some faces you never forget, especially when you're not sure they were ever real. I was a pharmacy tech working the night shift at a mid-sized hospital in northwest Alabama. My schedule was 7 nights on, 7 nights off, 6 p.m. to 4 a.m. On the 6th night of my shift week, I clocked out a bit early to head to my wife's aunt's house, where she was babysitting her 2 young cousins. That house didn't have any curtains, something that always made my wife uneasy after dark. But that night she was more anxious than usual. So despite having been awake nearly 24 hours, I went to stay with her. Come morning, we had to take the kids to school, do some grocery shopping, and then I headed back for my 6 p.m. shift. I caught a few minutes of sleep in my car and grabbed 2 Red Bulls to power through. The shift started like normal. I had my headphones and restocking Omnicell machines in the surgery area. The operating rooms were eerily quiet, sterile under harsh white light, while the janitorial crew cleaned up the used suites. At one point, I heard a door open and slam shut behind me. I turned, no one was there. I pushed my cart into the next room. The lights were off. When I opened the door, I saw someone crouched over the sharps container, the bin where blood-contaminated materials and needles go. Someone had been fired before for trying to steal morphine that way. I flicked on the lights, and there was no one there. I told myself I was hallucinating from exhaustion. At 2 a.m., I went to deliver meds to the 5th floor. Area 5455 was under renovation, totally vacant. As I stepped into the hallway, there wasn't a single soul. Just rows of darkened rooms, empty beds, and silence. I kept walking, and that's when I heard a metallic clang like a bed frame shaking violently. I peered into room 5512, and what I saw, I will never forget. An elderly man lay on the bed, seizing violently, blood streaming from his eyes, nose, and mouth. The monitor was beeping out of control. He was groaning, gurgling like something out of a zombie movie. I froze against the wall, paralyzed with fear. But when I looked back into the room, it was empty. No blood. No patient. The bed was neatly made. The monitor was powered off. I sprinted to the elevator and rode it down to the main floor where the pharmacy was. As the doors opened, a man in a security uniform stepped in and placed a hand on my shoulder. I froze. It was him, the same man from room 5512. He smiled calmly as the doors closed. I watched the numbers rise, stopping at the 5th floor. But before I could press the button to call the elevator back down, it returned on its own. Empty. I spent the rest of the shift holed up in the pharmacy office, too afraid to step outside. When the sun finally came up, I walked to the parking lot to meet my wife. I looked up toward the 5th floor window, and there he was, standing, watching me. You've just heard 4 terrifying true stories, each leaving its own haunting mark, a mysterious melody echoing through the woods, a figure that shouldn't exist inside a hospital, a man lurking in the dark, and a voice whispering from a pitch-black basement. If you've ever experienced something strange, chilling, or unexplainable, leave a comment below. You might not be the only one who's seen it. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel so you never miss another scary story. I'm your channel name and you're watching Scary Stories.